what happened back then? Like this guy and just requested from IWC a unique watch, and for some unknown reason, IWC actually just happened to say, yes, it will be with you in a couple of months. And it disappeared, and then it was just the article. And then a year later was one of the traders that I follow, email came through monthly, what we've got in stock, and it was there. 2 or 3 sleepless nights about
to work out how to make it happen.
What do I do? How this is silly, and I don't need this in my life, but I always need this in my life.
Yeah. For those who don't know James, give us a quick intro, because you're an interesting man. You're not just a watch lover.
Not just a watch lover, no. It's work for Mercedes AMG HPP, which is high performance powertrains, and yeah, we make half the business makes the Formula One powertrains for Mercedes, McLaren, Aston, and Williams, and I work on the advanced technology side of the business. So the AMG One and recently the EQXX, and yeah, we're going into more of a R&D world to help Mercedes go into electrification and move that forward and hopefully catch up and beat Tesla, which is the dream, I think.
And did cars come along many years before watches did?
Yes, so that was the original dream. I went to uni, studied engineering, and I think 2 years in was very much love engineering, still do, that's engineer at heart, and the technical side of it, and then got into Formula Student, build a single-seater racing car, but then very much got involved in the business side of it, raising the funds, raising the money to actually run the team, because it was extracurricular, wasn't part of the degree, and yeah, loved that side of it, placed in competition, and that kind of then went into London. Followed friends, that was the main reason for going to London, and then ended up in finance, and then kind of 4 years into it realised that I want to go and work back in my passion, and this job came up and thought I'm going to go do it and merge engineering and finance together, and here we are. And then watches were kind of alongside of that, and but vintage was always the one. I say vintage looking at the one on the table is very much not vintage, but I blame you entirely for that, and other people through Instagram. So,
but you're one of those watch guys that have come to it through engineering, but you also have a massive appreciation for design, because you're not all about movements, for example. Like some guys we get to speak to often come to watches because they have an engineering background and they love the mechanics of it, but actually, in fact, the watches that you've bought, the 2-watch collection that you've bought today, is almost entirely about history and design.
Yeah, very much so. Appreciate the mechanical side of it and understand the movement, the appreciation for the finishing, and I suppose these watches, they don't have clear case backs, but it doesn't bother me. If anything, the engineer, the movement in there, which ended up being the 854 1B, which is the first watch I got, which was gold. It was from my mum for a graduation present. She wanted to get me something to obviously remember those years for, and that will always be there. That will never go from the collection, and that's kind of a movement from there. And that was the engineer, kind of linked to my dad in a way. 1955 was the year he was born, and IWC was the script to start with. Originally, my mum wanted to take me to a dealer and just probably end up getting a Rolex. We would have thought maybe a Milgauss. And then I just didn't really buy into that whole concept of going in and maybe getting something that kind of anybody else could have. And then it was, yeah, Zoops was very, very nice watches to start with. Now I know the guy that ends up putting those watches into Zoops, and again, connecting him. And that's what it ended up being. It was 9 months. Didn't have any watches from IWC, and for 9 months of investigation and research, lots and lots of research about what the best one was for me. And originally it was the Cal 89, I think, from a movement point of view, but I couldn't find any. Couldn't find any that were quality, like condition of really good dials. So ended up starting there, and then it kind of just blew up.
So why IWC, other than the link to engineering, for example, and the fact that maybe they're a little bit off the beaten track? Was there anything else there? What else connected you to the brand?
I think it was just the vast amount of history that they had, and maybe they don't really touch into that enough. I know they've got the history with the pilots, but you have so many different ranges. You've got the engineer, you've got the Portofino, which was kind of one where I originally wanted to get, but it just didn't have that size. And I know
You're killing me about that. Is it
yeah,
the 5251?
I know exactly what you want. And yes, we did find one in Zurich.
That. For anyone who's not seen one before, James is talking about the 5251, the original Portofino with Roman numerals, 46mm disc-like, I mean, a pocket watch, right?
Yeah.
And we'll come on to pocket watches, but it's no surprise you love that reference.
Yeah.
With the Navinturin stone moon phase, I just absolutely love it. It makes no sense. But in many ways, that watch for me is the encapsulation of what watches are about.
Yeah.
It's all about heart. You can spend weeks, as you did mulling over this watch, weeks and months trying to make sense of it, but none of it makes sense. It's all about heart. It's got to be about heart.
Yeah. Which is very much what you do. You get very stuck in straight away.
Yeah.
You send me a picture and I'm saying,
Shit.
go get it. And then you mull over that for about a year, and then eventually one pops up and you realise that you've got to get it. But I mean, you're going to have to get the 5251 at some point. Because there is that picture of it on your wrist. And you very much nearly walked out with it straight away.
But you're a details guy, James. You're the opposite of me in many ways, and I think that's why our friendship works so well. And when we've travelled, we've been to Zurich together to look at watches, and super geeky as that is, the watch travel industry hasn't blossomed yet, but we're going to take that by storm in years to come. But you're a details guy. I look at a dial and I have an immediate response, which I tend to hold to, but you spend an awful lot of time really looking at everything. So for you, a case, a dial, hands, everything needs to be absolutely right.
Yeah, and that's part of the journey for me. Is through the account, it's kind of you get people messaging you all the time saying, do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy that? And yeah, and in a way you could get a huge collection very quickly because prices for IWCs, they're not as high as the likes of Patek, etc. But you have such a range. You have so many different configurations of dial. You have so many different markers and hands and Dauphine, baton. You've got so much, but then it's kind of really honing down. And that's what I've had. And everybody does. They go through a journey of maybe they buy a watch at the time they think they love, and eventually they realise maybe that's not part of my collection anymore. And it's really then focusing on the one or two pieces that you're kind of saying, right, I now need to find an equivalent because the one that you found is probably never going to leave somebody's collection as much as you push them and try to force their hand to say, I love that watch. But then you also respect the fact that it's in their collection for a reason, and you say, right, okay, I'm going to go and hunt for the other one, which is one of the pocket watches we found hiding behind the glass cabinet in a dome, and no idea how you spotted that.
On the Zurich trip, we came back with three watches in total.
Yeah.
The first was this pocket watch that was sort of hiding. It looked like a stand in a Turkish market. There was stuff everywhere, but we spotted this little pocket watch hiding behind there.
Spotted it, yeah.
And it was the Sector, right? It was the Sector.
Yeah.
Silvered. And actually, in many, and then the other two watches, we came back with an IWC Compass, which I found, and then a giant swatch. But that's a story for another day. But we've talked about this so much recently, the rise of pocket watches, because actually pocket watches seem to be, and rightfully so, getting a bit of love again, because they're some of the most beautiful objects that I think have ever been made, but get almost no love from people outside of the hardcore like us.
Yeah, and I suppose we talked about it quite a lot during the pandemic of. I was working from home and I just had all of them. I've got 3 now, and they were all just there. And you kind of rotate, but winding them up, and I think you get so much appreciation for the design that went in it. I mean, they're a lot bigger, but the stepped case, the salmon dial one, which was just, again, one of these things that he just pulled out of the drawer and was like, oh, you might want to take a look at this. And
forgive me, I forgot that salmon coming
back. Yeah, that came back.
Two pocket watches coming back from Zurich.
Of which one of them you were saying, if you don't get this, I am going to get this. And I mean, we talked about it as well. You can appreciate it. It's much of them, I'd love to have them on the wrist, but the equivalent dial on the wrist is going to be crazy amounts of money that you'll just never, and they probably don't even exist.
And maybe it's a good opportunity to ask people whether they would also use what we've been mulling over for a long time, which is this idea of taking the pocket watch and, for lack of a better term, making the pocket watch great again. Putting it on a table, using a stand or having a stand of some description, because everything every morning I come to my desk and the first thing I do is wind that aluminium, that Vacheron aluminium up. And I look at that and it genuinely does something to me every time I see it. I genuinely think it's stunning. Thank you, sir. That's incredibly loud out there. I hope that's not too loud for us. I just genuinely think it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. And that ticking, that reassurance on the desk, the time is way out, and that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. I've missed meetings and calls, Zoom call. I've missed tons of Zoom calls because the pocket watch is way out of time. But that's irrelevant. You know, I just think, yeah. If anyone reckons that that's something they'll use, please let us know, because if enough people say they'll also get benefit from it, then we need to make it happen. We've been umming and ahhing about it for some time, but interestingly enough, you've not brought a pocket watch with you.
I've not brought a pocket watch.
Which was an option.
You told me to bring 2, so I brought 2.
Yeah, 2 watch collection. Tell us what we've got here, James. What's the first one you bought?
The first one is IWC 666A, no date, and this is what we were talking about earlier in terms of a complete treasure that you find and can't take your eyes off. So many questions of why. Like, why did a gent from the Netherlands decide to take everything off the watch, or not even apply it? I suppose you can look at it 2 ways. And the complete new dial request through his local dealer, who had a close relationship with IWC, and IWC were willing to do it in 1965, and no second hand, just IWC script, the engineer script, and Swiss on the bottom. And yeah, it's one of these things that we travelled and found out the truth with it, with David, who's again completely got obsessed with this watch and was very grateful that we took it over there. And what a guy. He sorted it all out for us and got a few watchmakers to authenticate it. And it comes with one of the original letters.
IWC didn't actually make too many one-of-ones back then.
Yep.
But this process of authentication is something they offer now. So you can send your watch back to them and they'll tell you whether the parts were all made by IWC or not.
Yep. And that was part of it, I think, for me. It was just, there was a lot of murmuring in the watch, IWC watch collecting, of if it was real. And that was kind of my part of the journey, was just making sure that this is genuine, and I love it. You can spend hours looking at it, and you can be looking at that dial, and it's got this homogeneous kind of patina that I know in the monochrome article they said it looked kind of like an ostrich egg, and like you can see that. And originally probably a white dial was requested, and it's got dark black, extra black hands from the Mark 11, which again is kind of a why go and take. And that's the part from, like you say, with the design. I wish he is obviously not alive anymore, unfortunately, but that was kind of part for me, as do we try and find the original owner and just ask the question. He was an engineer himself, civil engineer.
Have you tried to reach out to them?
No, me and Frank, like he looked at the archives to find out, and he did pass away. But originally from Sumatra, Indonesia, went over to the Netherlands, and I think he was about 65, I think, when he ordered this watch. And it's very special. And
you've got all the paperwork there from the order itself.
Yeah, paperwork's there. It's the request with the plain dial, just the three logos, the IWC engineer and the Swiss. And they say they're going to do it, and I think it was 160 euros equivalent at the time, and they didn't charge him any extra for it, which is again like crazy. And
this for you was the kicker, right? I mean, the watch on its own, up on a site, probably wouldn't have got you to pull the trigger, right? But this...
But that, and the envelope, and it's got the original stamp and the date on there. I think, I don't know what festival that was happening in the Netherlands at the time, and it all checks out. Yeah. And that, again, that's part of it for me. And you see this, and you just seeing that was... your heart, like you say. Your heart just completely takes over any rational feelings. And...
I'm amazed you were able to hold like a week or two out before you made the decision, because you clearly had a bit of time between that call coming and then actually making the call.
Yeah, and it was a lot of phone calls just to say, like, how do we make this work, and how do I make it work, and no regrets. We'll be there for a long time, if not forever.
So James, tell us a little bit about this, because most people associate you with vintage IWC, but of course this is a modern Hodinkee reference that came out a few years ago.
Came out a few years ago, saw it come up on the site. Instantly fell in love with it, but so many questions as to this isn't kind of my style. It's not vintage, but yet it has such an element of vintage Mark 11 behind it. And I think for me it was the Ceratanium, the fact that it's also got the buckle and the crown in Ceratanium. And I didn't pull the trigger to start with. It was very much, waiting to see what people's responses was to it. And this was probably down to you with a few photos. I think you had Stevens, was it? Stevens from Hodinkee who was wearing it, and probably let you borrow it at some point. And a few other people that I'm now very friendly with on Instagram, been travelling with one of them and asking about 12 people, like, what do you get from this watch? And every single person, people complain about the rotor's quite loud, but I wear it every day. And for me and my lifestyle, we were joking about, or telling you about the impact that it had on the train earlier, and looking down and there being a lovely white mark on there, and thinking, oh God, no. But brushed straight off, look at the wall, and there's a nice little dent in the wall. So
because when we were in IWC, we actually got the chance to sit down with the chap who had developed Seratanium, Lorenz. And I think there, at least I felt there was some unknowns, you know, about it as a material, and how it would perform, because we know ceramic doesn't perform particularly well to sudden impact, but Seratanium was developed with the premise that it would have this extra strength to it. Yeah,
and that was kind of, I mean, it was the first time he'd even seen it in the flesh. I think he was ecstatic to see it. And he was trying to say to Chris to convince him to be able to buy one. But yeah, he was a great guy, and he explained the process, and I suppose the number of hours and months and years that they spent developing it. And now obviously it's going through the whole range, and they're doing different colours. You've got, I mean, you have the Mojave and had that before, and the white and the green that they've got out recently this year, and it's just a classic. Like, it's, when it came originally, I was still skeptical when it was, I know it was getting shipped over, and as soon as you see the dial, there's so much more depth to it than you actually think. But the no date again, I think they did, it's kind of, for me, one of the best collaborations I think Hodinkee have done. And yeah, need a new strap. Don't know if I'm going to go for the same one, or if I'll try and get something a bit darker, maybe go dark grey or slate grey.
And the hands really tie these two watches together in a beautiful way. The touch of Seratanium itself is interesting. It's different to ceramic, and the colour is also different. And I've only actually been able to see that myself in the last couple of months, where I saw the pilots, the chronographs next to one another, and I saw the difference in colour. It's quite interesting. What do you make of the dial itself? How do you view the loom? Is this Fotina? Is this their own take on a modern design cue? What is this?
It's just timeless. Like, it goes back to the original Mark 11, and that's what they've tried to bring out in it. And for me, I know we talked about before, you've got the 3705, which is unbelievable piece. And when you took that out at Watches and Wonders, everybody, it was like, honestly, like wasps to jam. It was just straight on the wrist on every single person. But I think this is, for me, you look at it every time, and even though you just glance at it, it's like any pilot's watch. You get the time straight away, and clean, crisp, nothing too fancy about it, but yet so much to it, and you just can't get enough.
What are you thinking next? Are you pocket watching? Are you modern IWCing? Are you even thinking about going outside of IWC?
Outside of IWC is Baltic for me at the moment. I know you've got the Aqua. I've got the MR1, 3 of them in fact.
The box set.
I got the box set.
The Christmas box set.
That was very much unknown at the time, and very much, that's through me meeting the guy who designs the dials, and we ended up again going on a trip to Prague and hunting watches and having a fantastic time. So hopefully, depending on what they might have coming up, always on the lookout for them, because I think in terms of the design, fantastic. And pocket watch, there's a few out there that I'm aware of and have constantly trying to convince people to maybe part with them, which is always a no to start with. And thanks to you, the Da Vinci.
The White Da Vinci.
The White Da Vinci.
The full white ceramic
full white
Da Vinci.
ceramic, with the white gold pushers. So I've reached out to a few people. There are very few of them in the world, only sold to the Italian market. And so if anybody knows of anything, then please reach out.
Have you ever seen that watch before, CG? No. So this was a watch that was made for the Italian market. I don't know how many they made.
Maybe 5.
Yeah, like under 10. I mean, what were they thinking? Who is this for?
Well,
what were they thinking? And bearing in mind, they'd only just started to innovate with the material itself. I don't know if white, where white came on their spectrum of development, but I have the Louis Vuitton watch that they made around the same time in green, and so I think there's still a lot more scholarship to come out around the different colours they were working with. I gather they even had a pink or an off pink.
The lime green as well.
Lime green. I mean, these right now would go nuts. Of course, the Da Vinci is incredibly unpopular, and rightfully so, because that new stuff is not good, you know. But the original Da Vinci was unbelievable.
But something I never would have looked at to start with, and I suppose that's me from a naivety or sort of understanding of what actually it meant. And I think, well, we met Kurt Klaus at IWC, and just the appreciation for what he actually managed to achieve, and then the movement side of it, being able to do everything through just the crown, but then also IWC being very innovative back at the time and actually trialing out different case colours, and it's come back full circle with the recent white case.
Lit Tahoe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And actually, when I look at that 3705, which I looked at this morning, and I had a moment in the car just looking at it thinking, you are just a beauty, 39 millimeters. I've got the Cousteau diamond today, which I'm super proud of as well, and I'm loving. And IWC does have that pull on me for so many different reasons, but I look at it and just think, my God. But when I look at that 3705, that ceramic case, I find that, and the Louis Vuitton actually, which I only paid 150 quid for, I think that takes me back to the late 80s when they were innovating, that they were pioneering, and Günter Blümlein, who unfortunately alongside Kurt Klaus, you know, Kurt Klaus is still with us, thank God, and apparently still works, comes down to IWC and works. But
it was fantastic.
I would have loved for us to have met Günter Blümlein, because apparently he was an absolute enigma of the industry, in the sense that he was an engineer, he was a designer, he was an entrepreneur, he was a leader, and he looked at that 3705 and said, you know what, let's do a sports watch, let's do a pilot's watch, but in black. And for me, that whole narrative, it inspires me to think, as cliche as that sounds, it inspires me to think differently about the possibilities of what things can be just by looking at that watch.
And they took Watches and Wonders by storm.
They did.
I suppose the energy surrounding their booth was, you walk outside and it was like a different world. Everybody was quite calm and peaceful, and you go in there, and I kind of think that's what they're standing for. They're pushing boundaries in terms of what people want from a watch. And I think going back to their history, you've got the whole line. You've got the pilot, which I know they've got the focus on, but the engineer, the SL, when, for me, going back to it, I mean, looking at it now, I wish I bought one. I ended up buying the Aqua Timer instead. It was too chunky for me, but who knows what they're going to do in the future. And yeah, I think they can tap into so many different lines and build on that history and actually pull it through into the story. And that's what people love. They want to buy into the brand.
Have you spoken to Lewis at work about his watch collection?
I've not. I know we spoke to Lorenz about it, and when he ended up having the whole Serotonin bracelet, and I won't say how it's held on, but yeah, he's got a few of them at the moment. And Toto's, I know he's got his. He's
got the Perpetual that's just come out.
Perpetual that's just come out, yeah.
The AMG green, right?
Exactly.
It's quite sexy. Have you seen that on his wrist yet?
I've not seen it on his wrist, no. He's different office, so he comes in now and again to try and push us to get the extra couple of tenths on the track. Last question, what would you like to see from IWC if you could? If you were this modern day client, what would you be asking of IWC if they were prepared to take a bespoke order from you down the line? A bespoke order for me?
One of one, James Green, anything you want.
Anything
you want, we'll do it. Even looking back in the archives, we'll do it.
Being from Wales, Welsh Gold.
We agreed we wouldn't speak about
that. We don't bring it up, especially not with rugby, thanks to the semi-final that you lovely kicked us out of. But yes, I think I know of another one of these through an individual, of a white gold version of that, and for me it would be something along that. Smaller cases. I mean, that's the biggest case I've got in the collection, and I know IWC have been slowly moving down there, and other brands are, and I know it's very different to them. The Pilot is much larger, so smaller case, thinner, everyday watch, probably steel bracelet for me. Not got one of those, but again, it's having seen how much that strap has gone through the mill. It's every day being able to just jump in the sea, and I don't know, maybe they'll keep staring at your wrist of what might be next, but that is extra large for me.
There's nothing better than seeing a great friend spend money and you not spending money yourself. So the idea that I've been able to bring this along and get you excited about it.
Thanks.
And actually the coolest thing is, these are not the two watches that we came to speak about, but we've got two Aqua Timers of two entirely different periods, and that's cool. That is so cool.
This is another one that I do wear, and design-wise, I don't see how you can get any better than this. it's you just fall in love with it, and it's perfect. It's sat in a safe for what, 30, 40 years, probably even longer, and fortunate enough, just the engraving on the back with the submarine, and it's, yeah, you very lucky. This one is very lucky, and yeah, the box that it comes with, and yeah, harkens to that. So maybe I do need to get one that I can wear in the sea when I go surfing.
Dear boy, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.